It's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is leak. Let's take a moment to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. Our first two definitions are going to be tied together. One is to pass in or out through a hole or crack by accident. So, with this definition, I would encourage you to think about liquids and gases. That's most commonly when we use or describe something that's passing through a hole or crack. A second way we use leak is to say that we're accidentally losing or admitting contents through some hole, crack, or other kind of broken object. And again, that idea is something is passing in or out. Okay? And again, most commonly, this is used with any type of liquid or gas. Now, a third way our verb leak gets used is going to sound very different, and that is to disclose secrets. So, anytime information is being shared publicly when perhaps it was meant to be kept a secret. You should know that the verb leak is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all I'm going to do is add ing to form leaking. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding ed. Our base verb, leak, ends in an unvoiced K sound. This means that the ed ending is going to make a T sound. It should sound like this: leaked. Leaked. Okay. There are a couple phrasal verbs that you might encounter. One is to leak in or leak into. Again, we tend to use this in describing some type of liquid entering into some area or container. And many times the idea is something is slowly flowing, right? We're not intentionally pouring a liquid into another object. We still have that meaning of something being a bit of an accident. An example of this might be the shampoo leaked into her gym bag. Okay? So maybe this has happened to you where you just didn't have a cap on tightly enough. And so as something falls to its side, right, it slowly begins to enter another area or leave one container and move into another area. That's what we're describing in that sentence. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to leak out or leak out of. And again, we've got this idea of some gas, some liquid seeping or flowing out of some crack, hole, or something else a bit similar. An example of this might be oil has been leaking out of the car. It's a pretty common problem that many people have had with their cars. It's one point or another, something breaking and causing, right, a little bit of oil to kind of drip out of the area in which it's supposed to be contained. Another way we can use leak out goes back to that third definition where we're talking about sharing something that was supposed to be a secret. An example of this might be someone has leaked out news of the spying program. So, spying is generally something that's secretive, so perhaps people were not supposed to know about it, but now we know this program exists. Let's move on and continue talking about our verb of the day, leak. And today we're going to practice the past progressive verb tense and the simple future. Let's start with the past progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that was ongoing during some point in time. So it might help for some people to think about something that was continuing. And for that reason, many teachers and textbooks will call this the past continuous, and that's perfectly fine. It means the same thing as past progressive. I like saying past progressive because I want my students to remember the two P's here are going to require that we have two parts to our verb. So to make a past progressive sentence, I'm going to start with my subject, and then I'm going to use the past form of be, and then I'm going to use the ing form of the verb. Now, be is always a special verb, and in the past tense, there are actually two forms of this verb. So, if my subject is you, we, or they, I'm going to use were, W-E-R-E, before that ing form the verb. But if my subject is I, he, she, or it, I'm going to use was and then the ing form of the verb. You can see that in my example. Water was leaking from the garden hose all through the night. Right? So this was something that was continuing. If I want to make a negative past progressive sentence, I need to insert not after my be verb and before the ing. Now you might hear was not turned into the contraction wasn't, and the words were not turned into the contraction weren't. You can actually see that in my example here. The pipes weren't leaking. Okay. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, I start with was or were, whichever form matches my subject. That subject comes next. Then I use the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Was the ship leaking oil into the ocean? Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future. Today we're going to make sentences with be going to. This is really common as people discuss their plans. You might also hear it with predictions. The thing to remember about this verb tense is we have to pay attention to our subject so that we have the right form of be. We're going to be using the present form of be to make sentences here. So if my subject is I'm going to use am going to and then the base verb. If my subject is you, we, or they, I'm going to use are going to and then the base verb. And finally, if my subject is he, she, or it, I'll use is going to and then the base verb. You can see this in my example. Staffers are going to leak information about the reasoning behind the new policy. So, for whatever reason, maybe an organization can't make a public statement about why they have this new policy, but perhaps they're going to make sure this secretive information gets out. Now let's look at making a negative sentence. To do this, again, I start with my subject, I use the form of be that matches it, then I use not going to and the base verb. Here's another example. The attorney isn't going to leak evidence before the trial. And that's probably a good thing. That would violate a lot of rules in most courtrooms to share something that was supposed to be kept private until a trial. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future and making yes or no questions in the simple future. To do this, I start with the form of be, whichever form matches my subject, that subject comes next. Then we use going to and our base verb. Final question. Are these windows going to leak? Right? Might be concerned about that if you're looking to rent a home of some type and it looks like maybe the windows are a little bit old. Perhaps you see some cracks and you're a little concerned, right? You're going to ask someone if this is likely to happen. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about some related words. And the first word we're going to discuss is the noun form of this word. So exact same spelling and exact same pronunciation as our verb. And just like our verb leak, the noun leak can also have a number of different meanings. One is to describe a hole in some container or covering in which contents like liquid or gas are accidentally passing. An example might be, I think there's a leak in that pipe. Right? Maybe you're looking under your kitchen sink, right, and you see some water dripping. Right? That would be a good sign that there is accidentally water passing. A second way the noun leak gets used is to mean the action of leaking accidentally. So very much connected to that first definition here, but an example of this might be, there's a gas leak in the neighborhood. Okay? And a third way our noun leak gets used is to mean intentionally sharing or disclosing something that was supposed to be secret or private. An example of this: who is responsible for the leak? Right? So here, this might be a question that's asked once something that was supposed to be private has now become public knowledge. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective leaky. This just describes a noun, a thing that might have a or one leak or many leaks. An example of this could be, this apartment has a leaky roof. Right? So when it rains, right, we might have water dripping from the ceiling. Another related word you might hear is the noun leakage. We're going to talk about two meanings that it can have. One is that accidental admission or escape of a liquid or a gas through some hole or crack. An example of this might be, they're making a plan to address methane leakage. So that's a type of gas, right? And I don't know if it's a business or something where this is accidentally escaping, and they need to make sure it's being contained or kept and stored in a proper way. Now, a second way the noun leakage gets used, again, goes back to the other definition we've been talking about. So anytime you're intentionally or on purpose sharing and disclosing private information. An example of this might be, the SEC has sued the company and alleged leakage of customer information. So they're saying this information that should have been kept private has been shared. One last word for today, and it's the adjective leak proof. It's describing something that has been designed or it has been built to prevent leaks or leakage. An example of this might be, they just bought some new leak-proof cups for their toddler, right? So hoping that no liquid comes out no matter how many times these cups might get dropped or knocked over. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.